Hello, now, this here is the story of Old Man Baird and the Ozark Howler. And it comes from, well, it's an adaptation, really, of uh, a story that comes out of the classic book, Tales of the Ozark Howler. Now, at this time that the story takes place, Branson was not formally incorporated. It would not be for two more generations at least. Now, you see, there's this history show I once saw in Branson, and it tells us that those Ozark Mountains, they were settled by yeoman farmers. They moved over from the Carolinas, Kentucky, Tennessee, and they were descendants of people who came in from the Isles of Great Britain, the Isle of Man, uh, Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, and those hill people. They brought with them the stories and the tales from their ancient homelands, such as the demon dogs of death. Now, you have to understand, life was really hard back then. Hard doesn't even begin to describe it. Mr. Baird was an example of that. And by the middle of the 1800s, Mr. Baird had earned the title Old Man Baird. He was just in his 40s, but he had made his home and his place of work inside a mountain. That mountain took on his name later on. He was living in a shack he constructed 30 feet or more inside the cave that he had expanded into a mine through his persistent digging for the mineral of lead. And now, this home was warm enough and dry enough to keep Mr. Baird in good health. If it wasn't for one problem, that was a lead mine, you see. Now, Old Man Baird had been digging into that mountain and hauling out lead for years, trying to sell it to make his fortune, but the truth was he was barely surviving. Now, maybe it was his isolation up there on the mountain. Looking back with the knowledge we have now of science and medicine, we can suspect he had problems associated with long-term lead exposure. But whatever the cause, Old Man Baird had begun to behave in ways that some people might call eccentric. So it wasn't a big surprise when the miner came down off of his hill, repeating over and over again to anyone who would listen to him. "It calls," he said, "it beckons, it howls. It calls, it beckons, it howls." Now, he gestured back toward his hole in the mountain, to his home. So eventually, Baird got a group of men to follow him back up to his mountain home. And there they waited until evening time, and they heard that very same sound. It was an animal calls, starting with a low moan, but then ending in a strange, twisted shriek. Well, that was no wolf, nor any other animal anyone knew of. And the strangest thing of all, that sound was coming down from in the ground, from within Baird's lead mine, down, down into the earth. Now these men, they were rough frontier people, but not one of them would have gone down alone into that mine to confront whatever was making that sound. Together they had courage. So with lanterns in their left hands and weapons in their right hands, they ventured on down. And coming into an opening about 50 feet into that mine, they saw something that nearly made their hearts stop. For you see right there were two red eyes. Now that's what they noticed first, shining back at them with a greater glow than any reflection their lanterns could ever have produced. And above them, fainter but even more alarming, were two great horns curling around like those of an old billy goat. Like a goat's as well was the creature's substantial, tangled beard, draping below a set of large, sharp teeth. Now, later on, those men would say that creature looked like the very devil himself. The men wavered for a moment, but then they advanced, and that creature howled. Oh, but the men moved forward, slowly but steadily. Now, seeing itself outnumbered, that beast turned, and it ran further on into that mountain. Following down, the men traveled further into the mine than Old Man Baird had ever gone himself, right past where he claimed he had stopped his digging just a week before. Now, none of those men ever saw that creature again, but they turned and twisted their way right through to another opening on the mountain, further on down that slope. Now they surmised that the monster had made its own lair in that cavern, one which Old Man Baird had unknowingly accessed through his own digging, disturbing that monster's home. Well, back down by the river, the men shared their story, and the word quickly spread. Now the consensus was clear. This was the Black Howler, a monstrous beast that had been whispered about by the people of the Ozarks ever since they'd begun to move west across the Mississippi. And that mountain was named Baird Mountain after Old Man Baird, who continued digging for some years more, never again seeing the monster face to face. Now those howls continued, though, but as if from some distance off, further up toward the peak. And there was room enough for the both of them, Old Man Baird thought, so long as that thing kept its distance, and it did just that. Decades later, Baird Mountain was named Magic Mountain because of those same howls, and the strange tingling combination of fear and excitement that they provoke. Now, not everyone in Missouri knows where Magic Mountain is, but some people say, those who live around Magic Mountain, that those howls can still be heard to this day, and that is the call of the Ozark Howler that never ever left its home.